We are going to be building a mood selector. You want to be asking users of your website whether they are happy or sad or excited or stressed out. And we are going to be building that using JavaScript. It's possible that you want to give your customers ice cream when they are feeling worn out. Maybe. Let's dive in. We have built our e-commerce website or portfolio website or whatever website we want to build. We have built it, but we want to add some animation to what we already built using JavaScript. I have an attribute here called class. We tend to use class attributes when you have elements on your website that would have similar properties. Like you want to style them the same way or you want to use JavaScript to do something to them. We also have another attribute here called ID. We tend to use ID when the element is going to be having some sort of unique feature. So there are many other attributes, but many times we tend to use IDs and class. We can get an element in JavaScript, but many times we use attributes to get elements. So when you have an element, you can manipulate it. So that was why I said that we needed to understand HTML, CSS, before we can understand how JavaScript itself works. Because we are going to be many times manipulating maybe the styles of the element using JavaScript. But before you can manipulate the element, you need to know the element itself or its attributes. So to use JavaScript in your HTML, you go close to the closing tag of the body and create your script tag. And right within it, you begin to write your JavaScript. Another way you can handle your JavaScript is using it externally. Many times when you use your JavaScript file externally, it can be used for multiple HTML files. The exact same thing that you will put within those tags, they are the same. The only difference is that one is inside your HTML file and the other one is sitting there on its own. So when you have an external one, you just have to create a file called something.js. So I am calling my file script.js. So when I'm using an external file, I have to use the src attribute. So you see, src is also an attribute, just like our character set, our char set. So inside our src, put in the full URL of your script. So my file is scripts.js. So as soon as I do this, I go into my script.js and start performing miracles. I have an empty script.js. Let's start animating our website. Since we are building a mood selector, then we need to have modes. For us to have modes, we need to create a variable to store those modes. Variables are containers where we store data. So let's create a container called modes. In JavaScript, your variables can be defined with either const, var, or let. It's advisable to use const and let. To use const when you are very certain that the value of that variable will barely change. But we use let when the DOM or the code or the user is allowed to change the value of that variable. So now I'm using const because I am limiting the user to just a number of modes. I don't want them to go beyond that number of modes that I have. So that's why I'm using const. And I have square brackets in front of my const. It is square brackets because I want to store something called an array. An array is talking about a list of things. So I want to have a list of modes. Those lists of modes are what we are going to show to the user. I using const to store it because we don't expect the list of modes to change. Array is a kind of data type. And now inside my array, I'm storing a different kind of data type, which is an object. What makes it an object? It's a key and a value. I am trying to store modes, but we need to be able to explain the mode. That's the whole idea behind the key and value. So what kind of mode am I displaying? I'm using an emoji to display the mode. So emoji has a value. The value I want to show is the smiley person. I give them the emoji that describes the emotion, and then I give them a label. Okay, this one is talking about a person feeling amazing. Then another key is the message. And the message is whatever I want to tell the user. So here I'm saying you are feeling amazing. Keep that energy going. That's what I want to show the users. We want to give them beautiful message based on their mood. And you can choose to give them ice cream based on their mood. The key and value allows you to group data that relates to a particular concept. All these three data relates to an amazing feeling. So we have to group them together in something called an object, which is what we have done there. So we have an object stored inside an array. Then now look at this emoji, label, and message, all those values are strings because they are within quotes. So there are different kinds of data. You could have an integer, and that's numbers, numerical values. You could have floats, and those are numbers that have decimal points. So let us increase our moods. I have so many moods now. I want to create another variable that will store the value of the mood that the user has selected. I use let selected mood. As I said, let and const tells us that this is a variable. We are trying to define the variable. So I'm defining my variable called selected mood to store the mood that the user has selected. And the value of this one is null. Null is also a kind of value. Null means that there is nothing. If you notice, my statements are ending with a semicolon. That's JavaScript for you. It tells the program that is the end of what you are talking about before you move on to the next step. We are also going to be manipulating our DOM. Our DOM, that's our HTML page, that's our DOM. I'm going to be picking things and moving them around. The first thing I want to pick is the Mood Selector. My Mood Selector is a div inside my HTML that is going to store all the moods that I've already put in my array. So this Mood Selector is supposed to display all the moods. So the user goes there and pick one of the moods that they are feeling. How do I get the element? I just say document.getElementById. So I'm trying to get the element by its ID. And the ID of the element is Mood Selector. What JavaScript does is to go to my HTML and look for the elements that has an ID called Mood Selector and stores it into that variable and is a const because I'm not expecting that element to change. I went ahead to pick my results section. The results section is supposed to display what the user selected. Then I also want to show the emoji. So there's a part that shows the results. It's the slightly gray box that is supposed to show the results section. And the results emoji is supposed to be this emoji part where it's going to change. So there is an element holding this emoji. When I select my mood, then the emoji is supposed to change. The text is supposed to change and display the message we want to show the user based on the mood they have selected. So we have gotten all these elements based on their ID by using document.getElementById. So everything within those parentheses and quotes are IDs. Now we want to first write a function that will display those emojis that the user will be selecting. When you want to create function in JavaScript, you start with the word function. Then the name of your function, which is create mood buttons. Then you have parentheses and curly brackets. So your curly bracket is where you're going to put the step-by-step instruction that your code is supposed to follow to create those buttons. Inside the parentheses, you put the ingredients that your code needs to achieve those step-by-step instructions. Right now, I don't have any ingredients, so I'll just give it my step-by-step instruction. So I want to go through all my array of moods and say for each item or for each mood inside my array of moods, pick each one and create an element and paste it in the DOM. So I'm using my ForEach. I say moods.forEach. Mood is a variable that's going to be storing the mood that has been looked through by the ForEach. ForEach goes into all the moods array and pick each one and does whatever I ask it to do. So the first thing it does is that when it picks that one, it stores it into a variable called mood that I put in my parentheses before it now applies the instruction. So I say, create an element that is a div. JavaScript can do that. And then store that element that you have created into a variable named btn. Then I tell JavaScript, give that element a class name of mood-btn. The element has been created. I'm not asking JavaScript, give it a class name. Most of the time when this is done, that class name has been styled in our CSS that we have defined before. So all you are doing is just telling JavaScript, this div you just created, give it this class name so that it will absorb and adapt the style that we have created in our CSS. After giving it the class, and I am creating two elements inside my btn. I'm creating two spans. One span to store the emoji and another span to store the label. As you can see, I have defined it just like HTML. So that's why I'm saying btn.innerHTML. So that means I'm saying take this text as an HTML element and put it inside my element I just created. That's the btn.innerHTML. That's a backtick. I'm putting my HTML string inside backticks because I'm trying to use a variable inside my backticks. So that's what backticks do. If I was just using plain characters, then all I would have used were quotes to store the plain text or plain characters. But I want to put variables, and I want those variables to convert into their content. That is why I'm using backtick. So backtick will take those things inside the curly brackets, convert them into their data before supplying that data to the DOM. So I have taken the mood, I created a div, gave it a class name, and I now took that div, put some spans elements inside that div, and then inside the span I am also putting my emoji for one and the label in the other. After creating that div and buttons, the next thing I want to do is to put that new thing I've created inside my mood selector. I told you we had a container where we want to display all the moods. So when you have done all those styling and putting spans and all that, you now want to insert it into your DOM. All what we have done so far was creating, but right now mood selector.appendChild is inserting it inside the DOM. So basically, as soon as I call my function, I expect to see all those moods on my page. So to call your function, you just write your function name and parentheses in front. If the function is using ingredients or arguments, then you will put those arguments in. If not, then you leave it empty. As you can see, as soon as I called my function, my HTML page is populated with all the moods that I have available. JavaScript for you. But now we don't just want to show users moods. We want them to be able to interact with those moods. So for the user to interact with the mood, we are going to be creating a function called selectMood. As soon as the user selects the mood, then we want something to happen based on the mood selected. As you can see, this function is using an ingredient, it's taking in an argument, and the name of the argument is taking is mood. So we give it a mood, and then we want it to do something with the mood we have given it. The first thing we want it to do is to update our selected mood variable and say, okay, this is the new mood the user has selected. So if the user had selected happy before, when we activate the selected mood function, it's supposed to update it to the new mood that user selected, not hold on to the old one. We also want the user to know what mood he or she has selected. So we have to highlight the mood in a different way so the user knows this is the mood that has been selected. So I use EVT. EVT for me means event. I want to get an event. The only time I want to call this select mood function is when the user clicks on the mood, because that's what we're going to do. The user will be clicking on the moods to tell me which one they want. So as soon as the user clicks on the mood, an event has occurred, because clicking is an event in JavaScript. When I say evt.target, we are saying that the event, the target of that event, the target of the click, whichever element was clicked, we are taking that particular element. We are now looking for the closest element that has a class mood-btn. I mean class because I use dot. If I had used £, that would have been ID. But dot indicates class, as we have discussed in CSS. We are now saying that target, that element that has a class of mood.button is closest. That is this family member of that element that we clicked. And then want to add to his class list. It has a class list. I don't know how many classes it has. An element can have multiple classes. So we are now saying, out of all those classes, so we wanted to add another class called selected. We have styled selected in our CSS. We have made it a way that the user will know that this thing has been selected. But we are using JavaScript to update it so that the user will know that this is what I have selected, and the user does not get confused as to, okay, what have I selected or what haven't I selected. The problem with this right now is that if we keep adding selected to buttons that we have selected, all of them will have a class called selected. So there has to be a way to first remove the initial selected that's been added to the button so that it's only the current one that will have that class called selected. So the first thing we'll do is to get all the buttons, and I'm storing it in a constant variable called all buttons. So I say documents.querySelectorAll. When I say document.querySelectorAll, I'm saying get all the elements. We don't know what elements, but get all the elements. Then within the parentheses, I'm now describe what kind of elements I'm getting. QuerySelectorAll select multiple elements. And which elements are we selecting here? We are selecting elements that have classes called mood-btn. The dot makes us know that we're referring to a class. As soon as you use QuerySelectorAll, JavaScript is expecting a list of things. So the list of things might contain only one element. So we are storing it in a container or a constant variable called all buttons. Then we use our for each again to loop through that. Pick every element, every button in this all buttons list or array and begin to work on them. So the first thing we do is that we pick a button, we give it a name, a variable name called btn. Then after we go through its class list and remove only the one that is called selected. Then after the removal, the one that we clicked on, take the class called selected. We first do a cleanup of anything that is holding any class called selected. Then we now give the one we have actually selected currently the class called selected. This clicking can only happen if we add an event listener to the elements. If the element is not expecting a click, it's not going to be listening for it. So what do? We come back to our original function that is creating the buttons and telling that each button you create, add an event listener to it. btn.add event listener, and the event we are adding is the click event. And we are saying that as soon as this event is clicked, call on this function. The add event listener take in 2 arguments. It takes the event that you are listening for. In this case, it's a click. And then the second thing it takes is a function. And here we are using an arrow function. This is an arrow function because it's using arrow, as you can see in front of it, the parentheses and the arrow. That's the arrow function. But now it's an anonymous function because there's no name. We just want to quickly do something, so we don't need to give it a name. We're not going to be calling the function we are creating. What we have here is a callback function. It's going to be called by default inside the add event listener call. As soon as this click happens, call this function. And the function that we are calling is select mode. Select mode requires an ingredient. It requires an argument. So we are giving it the ingredient it takes, which is called mode. Whenever I click, which is the event, it's supposed to send in that event to the function call, and then the function call does what I've asked it to do. So when I click now, I can see the selected class has been activated. That is why there's a blue outline on the emoji that has been selected. So the user knows when it has been selected. It's nice to make a website user-friendly, to be intuitive. We don't want users to be guessing whether, has it clicked? I don't know. But as soon as the user sees a blue outline, he or she knows that something has happened, that the event has been handled. But we want to show the user that, okay, after you click though, this is the message we have for you. So that's the next thing. We want to update our message based on the user's choice. I have defined my function, giving it its name. Then I want it to use an argument called mode. So that's what it's going to be using. The mode that was selected is what it's going to be working with. As soon as I call this function, I want the user to get the result emoji and get the content inside the result emoji element and change it to the current one. So I say result emoji.text content. Take your content and give it a new one. The new one I want to give it is the new emoji. So what was there before was an old emoji. We want to give it a new emoji. We also want to update the message that the user is getting. So we say the result text. I want to update the label of the emotion. So we are saying result text or text content, the same thing. We are changing it. We are saying you are feeling so. What's the user feeling? Whatever he clicks. The user is clicking on a mood, and we are collecting the label of that mood and inserting it into the backticks that generate the entire script for us based on the content of the variable that we have inserted. We now want to show the message to the user. So we are going to the results section and picking the element that has a class called result subtext. That's where we want to show the message to the user that, oh, you are feeling happy, take ice cream. So we are getting that element. So we say result section.query selector. What we have done so far is say document.query selector. Document is talking about the entire web page. But as soon as we say result section, we are saying, okay, this particular element I've chosen, go inside yourself and get me the element that has this particular attribute I'm about to define. So you can either refer to the entire web page, or you can refer to elements inside the web page. In this scenario, we are not referring to the entire web page. We are referring to a section, which is the result section. We now say query selector. Query selector is picking the first element that meets the condition that we have explained here. Query selector or gets all the elements that fits in. Well, query selector gets just the first one. And we are saying get the element whose class is result subtext. Class because we used a dot. Then we store that in a constant variable called subtext. We want to update that. So we are taking that subtext, changing the text content, and putting the mood message inside. so that when the user selects, this happens. Show them this message. Then apart from that, we also want to show some form of animation. So what do we do? We say we want to get that results section and go to its style. We are going to CSS. Go to its style, then get that attribute inside style called transform, and then give it a scale. Scale as CSS is we're either increasing or reducing. And so we are saying we are scaling downward to 0.95. That's 95%. So we want it to shrink. But then we don't want it to stay permanently shrunken. After the user makes his selection, we want things to go back to normal. We have given you your ice cream or your gift or whatever. We want to go back to the normal page in case you want to choose something else. So what do? We would wait for a few moments and change it back. And for us to wait for a few moments, what's available to us in JavaScript is SetTimeOut. SetTimeOut takes your function, then the amount of time you want to wait before doing what you want to do inside your function. So I have defined my function. I have an anonymous function. It does not have a name, so we just want to quickly run something. We don't need to give it a special name. And then after we define our function, we insert a comma and add the number of milliseconds we want to wait. So here we want to wait for 100 milliseconds. If you want to wait for a second, then you are going to have 1000. So inside I define my function and I return it and say, okay, results section does style, transform, scale. So I'm giving a scale of 1, meaning go back to your original size. So where do we want to use it? We want to use it when the user clicks. So we are going to go into our select mode function and do the updating there. And say, okay, after you have already added the class, then update. We want to call that function called update. And then we want to give it the mood. So that means that when I click, I'm supposed to get the results. I clicked stressed and it updated my emoji. It also said you are feeling stressed. So I had the you are feeling and it did that. Then it gave me my message. Take a deep breath. You've got this. I've got this. We have discussed variables. We have discussed arrays. We have discussed objects. We discussed functions. We also discussed the manipulation of our DOM. And then we added event listeners. Isn't JavaScript awesome? Just imagine the number of things you could do with what we just learned. Like you could ask users to click on things and display something else to the user. When the user clicks on a product, you show up the price of the product. Or the user clicks on, I've read this book, and you give him a pop-up of good job. There are many things you can do with what we just learned. You are feeling amazing. You are feeling happy. So you are feeling calm. You are feeling okay. But basically, you can allow your users select different emotions. You can use this to build a beautiful and awesome game that involves displaying elements based on user choices. So guys, I want you to go through this, what we have done so far, and add more moods that you can show your users and possibly change the message, like maybe give the user a gift based on his mood. And then drop what you have built in the comment section below. Let us look at it and marvel at your work. And don't worry about making mistakes. We will make plenty of it, but the mistakes make us better. So guys, if this has been helpful, please like. Also share to other people that you believe need to learn how to build beautiful things using JavaScript. Please subscribe so you can get an alert as the other series of these videos come along. I look forward to seeing you some other time. Bye-bye.